to let the world know that you are a repulsive liar. I was sexually assaulted by Larry Nassar when I was 9 and 12 years old.
She took her own life because she couldn't deal with the pain anymore.
You used my body for 6 years. My father and I did our best to patch up our tattered relationship before he committed suicide in 2016.
I would ask you to, as part of this sentencing, to grant me 5 minutes in a locked room with this demon.
Michael Madison.
Killer Michael Madison has made 2 requests for his upcoming court appearances. 1, he wants to go to court without restraints. And 2, he wants to wear regular clothing to all proceedings. So far, the judge has not responded to these motions. Madison is expected to appear at a pretrial hearing tomorrow. He's charged with murdering the 3 women and leaving their bodies in trash bags.
A convicted serial killer responsible for the deaths of 3 women faced the wrath of his victims' families during his sentencing. As the prosecutor detailed Madison's heinous acts, the father of one of the victims began trembling, his hands gripping the edge of the courtroom bench. When Madison smirked, the father erupted. He charged at Madison, managing to strike him multiple times before being pulled away by security. The courtroom, already tense, descended into chaos as the father yelled, "You took my baby!" His actions, though quickly contained, became a symbol of the unbearable grief and rage that accompanies such senseless violence.
How you doing, Your Honor? My name is Van Terry. Wow, that's Shirley Terry. Right now, I guess we're supposed to, in our hearts, forgive this clown who's touched our families, taken my child.
For a man who had spent months suppressing his anguish while sitting through trial proceedings, the father's outburst was not surprising to those who knew him. Friends of the family later described him as a loving and devoted parent who had been broken by Madison's crimes. The smirk that Madison displayed, seen as a sign of arrogance or apathy, had been the final trigger that pushed the grieving father over the edge. The father's attack left Madison visibly shaken, a rare break in the killer's otherwise stoic demeanor throughout the trial. Larry Nassar, a father's fury for his daughters.
The hearing began with former U.S. gymnastics Dr. Larry Nassar being ordered into the witness stand so his victims could look at him right in the face.
I testified to let the world know that you are a repulsive liar.
One by one, they shared their stories.
I am Jessica Tomashow, also known as Victim A. I was sexually assaulted by Larry Nassar when I was 9 and 12 years old.
You broke and shattered a lot of girls. You manipulated us to trust you because you're a doctor, and doctors do no wrong, only heal. You are not a healer.
He betrayed my trust, took advantage of my youth, and sexually abused me hundreds of times.
The mom of one victim spoke on behalf of her daughter.
In 2009, she took her own life because she couldn't deal with the pain anymore.
The victims described how Nassar violated them even while their parents were in the examination room, unaware of what was going on.
His conniving and calculating behavior not only tricked me, but he tricked my mom, who was present for all my appointments as a minor.
Larry Nassar, the disgraced USA gymnastics doctor convicted of sexually abusing hundreds of young athletes, became a symbol of predation and betrayal. During his sentencing hearings, dozens of victims and their families delivered heart-wrenching testimonies recounting the years of trauma he had caused. One father, whose 3 daughters were among Nassar's victims, stood to address the court. Overcome by anger, he asked the judge for 5 minutes alone with Nassar. When the judge denied his request, the father lunged at Nassar, shouting, "I'll take 1 minute." Courtroom officers restrained him, but the attack captured the depth of fury and helplessness felt by families torn apart by Nassar's crimes.
Kyle Stevens says Nassar began abusing her when she was 6 years old in his basement. Her parents were friends with Nassar and his wife.
You used my body for 6 years for your own sexual gratification. That is unforgivable. You convinced my parents that I was a liar.
When her father found out the truth, he was devastated.
My father and I did our best to patch up our tattered relationship before he committed suicide in 2016.
She stared Nassar down in court.
Perhaps you have figured it out by now, but little girls don't stay little forever. They grow into strong women that return to destroy your world.
Distraught father have a chance to say something.
Go ahead, sir.
You son.
In a courtroom, we don't use profanity, but if you have some words that you would like to say, I would like to give you the opportunity to say them.
I would ask you to, as part of this sentencing, to grant me 5 minutes in a locked room with this demon.
I have
Would
a
you
feeling
do that?
that is not how
Yes
our.
or no?
No, sir, I can't.
Would you
do
give me
that.
1 minute?
You know that I can't do that. That's not how our legal system.
Well, I'm gonna have to get stuff
Press Morgan. I'll
Let me have it.
Matt, get over there, Matthew. Hurry up.
I want that stuff.
Behind your back.
Give me 1 minute with that. What if this happened to you guys?
Not behave like that. No one can behave like this. I want to make sure it's crystal clear.
You haven't lived through it, lady.
You cannot behave like that.
The father's actions became one of the most talked about moments of the trial. As he was subdued and escorted out of the courtroom, onlookers expressed sympathy for his emotional outburst. The judge, while firm in maintaining courtroom decorum, acknowledged the father's grief and refused to punish him further, recognizing the unique circumstances of the case. For the victims' families, the father's attempt to confront Nassar physically felt like a moment of shared vindication, even if it was fleeting. Quinn Bowes, a family torn apart. Quinn Bowes was convicted of killing his infant son, a crime that left his family devastated. During his sentencing hearing, Bowes stood before the court expressionless as the baby's mother wept uncontrollably in the gallery. Unable to contain herself, she rushed forward, screaming at Bowes and swinging her fists wildly. Court officers intercepted her, but not before she managed to scratch Bowes' face, leaving visible marks. The outburst highlighted the unimaginable pain of losing a child, especially at the hands of someone who was supposed to protect them. Witnesses described the attack as a moment of pure, unfiltered grief. The mother had remained silent through much of the trial, but seeing Bowes stand there without a hint of remorse had unleashed her fury. Onlookers were divided in their reactions. Some believed her actions were understandable given the circumstances, while others felt that it detracted from the solemnity of the proceedings. Regardless, her attack left a lasting impression on everyone in the courtroom, a stark reminder of the human cost of Bose's actions. Dale Williams, rage unleashed in the name of justice. Dale Williams was convicted of murdering a 17-year-old girl in Ohio, a crime that tore a family apart. In a chilling act of brutality, he ambushed his victim, strangling her in an isolated area. When Williams appeared in court for sentencing, tensions in the room were palpable. The victim's father, a man broken by grief but fueled by fury, couldn't hold back. As Williams stood stoically, offering no remorse, the father lunged toward him with a guttural roar. Security scrambled to restrain the grieving parent, but not before he managed to strike Williams square in the face. The attack was a desperate act of vengeance, a moment that encapsulated the unbearable weight of loss and the primal need to retaliate against such evil. As the father was pulled away in handcuffs, the courtroom spectators were left in stunned silence, many of them teary-eyed at the outpouring of grief and rage. Some murmured words of sympathy for the grieving father, while others sat in silence, shaken by the rawness of the moment. Meanwhile, Williams remained stone-faced, unmoved by the blow or the turmoil he had caused. His lack of reaction only deepened the family's anger, further underscoring the emotional divide between perpetrator and victim.
Get on the ground! Shot fired, 614. Get down! You okay, Jeff? Yeah. All illegal units start to fall out. Hands! What's Charlie Abby there? Yes. And by the hospital, where's everybody at? What is your location? 1496 clear. 1496 clear.
Thank you for stealing.
Say that, please.
Where's where do you have?
Huh? Where's right here.
Oh, my hip, oh God, please. Oh, don't do it, okay? No. I'm dying.
Got it.
Oh, God.
Let me go. They may have a chest deal.
Hold the gun.
The murder of a child is a crime that tests the limits of human forgiveness. Dwayne Smith, convicted of killing a young girl, faced the wrath of her family in the courtroom. During sentencing, as Smith smirked and showed no sign of remorse, the girl's uncle, a towering figure of grief and rage, stood up, shouting expletives. His words, fueled by years of unspoken pain, echoed through the courtroom. The uncle's voice, laced with anger, reverberated. "You took her from us, you monster!" With those words, the dam of restrained emotions finally broke. His fists clenched as he surged forward, crossing the courtroom's security barrier in a move that shocked everyone.
During the sentencing for a 3-year-old girl's death, a brawl broke out in a Detroit courtroom when the girl's father attacked Clifford Thomas.
As the uncle charged toward Smith, his anger seemed unstoppable. Spectators gasped, some stood up in protest, and others instinctively shrank back, unsure of what would happen next. The security team reacted swiftly, but they were too slow to prevent the onslaught. The uncle's fists landed with savage force on Smith's face. The courtroom erupted into chaos as deputies scrambled to contain the situation. The sound of fist meeting flesh echoed in the room, amplifying the raw emotion of the moment. Smith, his expression still one of arrogant indifference, barely had time to react before the uncle's blows forced him backward. The smirk wiped away from his face. Blood dripped from Smith's lip as the deputies finally wrestled the uncle to the ground, their grip firm and unyielding. The uncle was quickly escorted out in handcuffs, but the damage had already been done. Smith, still bloodied and shaken, was escorted away by guards, his previously confident posture now replaced with a semblance of vulnerability.
The courtroom was cleared and rescheduled. Jamila died in September 2014.
The uncle's outburst was met with a mix of reactions. Some in the courtroom looked on with shock, while others quietly nodded in approval, understanding the profound pain behind the attack. The mother of the murdered child broke down in tears, sobbing uncontrollably as her brother was removed from the room. For her, the attack was not just an act of vengeance, but a cathartic release of the anger that had consumed their family since the day they lost their daughter. James Douglas, the calm shattered by violence.
Next, we're opening the archives for a 1992 murder trial in Mobile, Alabama. 15-year-old defendant James Douglas Gonzalez.
James Douglas had been on trial for a series of violent murders that left the community in fear and outrage. Throughout the proceedings, Douglas had displayed little emotion, even as the gruesome details of his crimes were laid bare. His cold, indifferent demeanor stood in stark contrast to the pain and anguish of the victims' families, who relived their worst moments as each testimony was read aloud. On the day of his sentencing, the family of one of his victims sat in the front row, visibly trembling with rage. As the judge handed down a life sentence without parole, Douglas smirked, a gesture that sent one of the victim's brothers over the edge.
The jury returns with a verdict. Among those anxiously waiting is the victim's father, Matthew Hall Sr., and the victim's younger brother, Kevin. They're hoping that Gonzalez is convicted of murder. But when that doesn't happen, and the jury instead finds him guilty on a lesser misdemeanor charge of criminally negligent homicide, it's apparently too much for the younger Hall to take. Kevin Hall leaps from his seat and over a partition to charge at Gonzalez, and lands a punch to his face.
The smirk was the final straw. It was a symbol of Douglas's complete disregard for the lives he had destroyed, and it ignited an uncontrollable fury in the brother, who had already been struggling to cope with the loss of his loved one. Without warning, he leaped over the courtroom railing, his emotions completely overwhelming him. He charged at Douglas with the raw power of grief, tackling him to the ground. The two men struggled violently on the floor, fists flying, and with each punch that landed on Douglas's face, it was as if the brother was trying to beat back the horror of what had been done to his family. Security rushed forward, desperately trying to break up the fight, but for several moments the courtroom transformed into a chaotic battleground. The law, which was meant to bring order and justice, was temporarily shattered by an act of pure, uncontrollable rage.
It takes 8 people to pull the halls off of the defendant and pin them to the ground. More law enforcement is called in to restore order in the court.
The victim's brother, restrained and visibly shaken, shouted at Douglas, calling him a monster who deserved to suffer. Spectators in the courtroom watched in shock, some holding back tears, while others exchanged glances of understanding at the brother's outburst. Douglas, now bloodied but otherwise unscathed, remained silent, his smirk wiped away, but his indifference intact. Vashon Flowers, a mother's grief, turns violent. Vashon Flowers, convicted of a double homicide, sat emotionless during his trial, even as the victims' families recounted their pain. His lack of remorse acted as a catalyst for tension throughout the proceedings. When the verdict was read, the mother of one of the victims erupted into tears, screaming at Flowers from the gallery. In an instant, her grief turned to rage, and she surged forward, clawing at his face as security tried to hold her back. The courtroom descended into chaos as other family members tried to intervene, both to protect her and to join in her attack. The raw emotion on display was a painful reminder of the permanent scars left by Flowers' crimes, scars that no sentence could ever fully heal. Flowers recoiled under the woman's attack, briefly showing fear for the first time since his arrest. As guards restrained her, she screamed, "You don't deserve to live!" The outburst left a lasting impression on the courtroom, with many spectators visibly moved by the depth of her anguish. For those in attendance, the attack was not just an act of vengeance, but a raw expression of the pain and helplessness that comes with losing a loved one to senseless violence.